3. The biography of that great patriot and statesman, Daniel Manin of Venice, Italy, contains a very romantic example of the possibilities of will force. He was born in a poor quarter of the city. His parents were without rank or money. Venice in 1805 was under the Austrian rule and was sharply divided into aristocratic and peasant classes. He was soon deserted by his father and left to the support of his mother. He was a dull boy and could not keep along with other boys in the church schools. His mind labored as slowly as did the childhood intellects of many of the greatest men of history. Daniel seemed destined to earn his living digging mud out of the canals, if he supported himself at all. No American boy can be handicapped like that. But the children who learn slowly learn surely, and history, which is but the biography of great men, mentions again and again the fact that the great characters began to be able to acquire learning late in life. Napoleon and Wellington were both dull boys, and Lincoln often said that he was a dunce through his early years. Daniel Manin seems to have been utterly unable to learn from books until he was 8 or 10 years old. But his latent willpower was suddenly developed to an unexpected degree when he was quite a youth. Kossuth, who was a personal friend of Manin, said in an address in New York that the American Republic was responsible for the awakening of Manin, and through him had made Italy free. It appears that an American sea captain, while discharging a cargo in Venice, employed Daniel as an errand boy, and when the ship sailed, the captain made Daniel a present of a gilt-edged copy of the Lives of George Washington and John Hancock in 1 volume. The captain, who had greatly endeared himself to Daniel, made the boy promise solemnly that he would learn to read the book. But Daniel was utterly ignorant of the English language in print and had learned only a few phrases from the captain. The gift of that book made Venice a republic, led to the adoption of sections of the United States Constitution by that state, and carried the principles on into the Constitution of United Italy. That book awakened the sleeping willpower of the industrious dull boy. Even his mother protested against his waste of time in trying to read English when he was unable to conquer the primers in Italian. But he secured a phrase book and a grammar, and paid for them in hard labor. With those crude implements, without a teacher, he determined to read that book. Only one friend, a young priest in St. Mark's Cathedral, gave him any word or look of encouragement. But his candle burned late, and the returning daylight took him to his book to study until time for breakfast. Then came the daily task as a messenger or a gondolier. Some weeks or months after he began his seemingly foolish problem, he rushed into his mother's room at night, excited and noisy, shouting at her, "I can read that book! I can read that book!" There comes a moment in the life of every successful student of a foreign language when he suddenly awakens to the consciousness that he can think in that language. From that point on, the work is always easy. It must have been a similar psychological change which came into Daniel's intellect. So sudden was it, so amazing the change, that the priest reported the case as a miracle, and the little circle of the poor people who knew the boy looked on him with awe. Consul General Sparks, who represented the United States at Venice in 1848, wrote that Manin often mentions his intellectual new birth, and his success in reading the life of Washington in English spurs him on in the difficult and dangerous undertakings connected with the efforts of Venice to get free. When Daniel began to appreciate his ability to determine to do and to persevere, his ambition and hope brought to him larger views of life. He resolved to learn in other ways. He took up school books and mastered them thoroughly, and he became known as a boy who works slowly, but what he does at all he does well. He soon found helpers among kind gentlemen and secured employment in a bookstall. The accounts of his persistence and his achievements are as thrilling and as fascinating as any finished romance. He managed to get a college education, recognized by Padua University. He studied law and was admitted to the bar when he was 22 years of age. The Austrian judges would not admit him to their courts, and it is said he visited his law office regularly and daily for nearly 2 years before he had a paying client. But his strong will, shown in his perseverance in the presence of starvation, won the respect and love of the daughter of a wealthy patrician. They had been married but a short time when the Austrians confiscated the property of his father-in-law because of suspicions circulated concerning his secret connection with the Americani. That patriotic secret society was called the Carbonari by the Austrians, and Manin became the leading spirit in the Venetian branch. His will seemed resistless. He refused the presidency in 1832, when revolution shook the tyrannies of all Europe and Venice fell back under Austrian control. But in 1848 he was almost unanimously elected president of the American Republic of Venice. And in his second proclamation before the great siege began, he issued a call for the election, using, as Consul General Sparks records, the following language, as translated. And until the election is held and the officers installed, the following sections of the Constitution of the United States of America shall be the law of the city. He was determined to secure an American Republic in Italy. He lived to see it in Venice. Statues of Daniel Manin are seen now in all the great cities of Italy. And when the statue was dedicated at Venice and the city park square named after him, he was called the father of the new kingdom of Italy. General Garibaldi said that when Manin made a draft of the Constitution he proposed for United Italy, he quoted the American Declaration of Independence. The general also said that Manin insisted the government of Italy should be like the American Republic, and that it was difficult to convince Manin that a king, so-called, could be as limited as a president. Even Mazzani, the extremist, and both Cavour and Gavazzi finally came to accept Manin's demands for freedom and equality as they were set forth in the Constitution of the American Republic. Manin did not live to see the final union, nor to see his son a general in the Italian army, but his vigorous will gave a momentum to freedom in Italy, which is still pressing the people on to his noblest ideals. What man has done, man can do, and what Manin did can be done again in other achievements. The normal reader never was anxious that the North Pole should be located, and he does not care now whether it has been discovered. Mathematicians and geographers may find delight in the solution of some abstract problem, but the busy citizen who seizes his paper with haste to see if Peary has found the North Pole has no interest in the spot. He would not visit the place if some authority would give him 1,000 acres or present him with a dozen ice floes. What the reader desires is to learn how the willpower in those discoveries worked out through hair-breadth escapes, long winters, and starvation's pangs. It is a great game, and the world is a grand stand. The man with the strongest will attracts the admiration of the world. All the world which loves a lover also admires a hero, and a hero is always a man of forceful will. When we read of Louis Joliet and James Marquette in their terrible experiences tracing the Mississippi River, Indians as savage as wild beasts, marshes, lakes, forests, mountains, burdens, illness, wounds, exhaustion, seeming failures, all testify to their sublime strength of purpose. Peter Lemoyne, Jonathan Carver, Captain Lewis, Lieutenant Clark, Montgomery Pike, General Fremont, Elisha Kent Kane, Charles Francis Hall, David Livingstone, Captain Cook, Paul du Chaillu, and Henry M. Stanley carved their names deep in walls of history when differing from other men only in the cultivation of a mighty will. Mary Lyon, the heroine of Mount Holyoke, used to quote frequently the saying of Dr. Beecher that he once had a machine admirably contrived, admirably adjusted, but it had one fault: it wouldn't go. While Catherine Beecher would retort that Miss Lyon had too much go for so small a machine. But what a monumental triumph was the dedication of the first building of Mount Holyoke College at South Hadley, Massachusetts. Mrs. Deacon Porter wrote to Henry Ward Beecher, "I wish you could have seen Miss Lyon's face as the procession moved up the street. It was indeed the face of an angel." From that immortal hour when that little woman, peeling potatoes as her brother's housekeeper at Buckland, Massachusetts, suddenly determined to start a movement for the higher education of young women, she had written, had traveled, had begged, had given all her inheritance, had visited colleges and schools, going incessantly, working, praying, appealing, until the material embodied of her martyr sacrifices was opened to women. All women in all countries are greatly in her debt. Men feel grateful for what the higher education of women has done for men. One cannot now walk over the embowered campus of Mount Holyoke College without meditating on what a forceful will of a frail woman, set toward the beautiful and good, can do within the severest limitations. Vassar, Wellesley, Smith, Bryn Mawr, and the 35 other colleges for women in western and southern states are the children of Mount Holyoke. One lone woman, one single will, a large heart. God sees her and orders his forces to aid her. Richard Arkwright, Stevenson, and Edison, in the pursuit of an invention, with stern faces and clenched teeth, work far into the morning. John Wesley Whitefield, and the list of religious reformers from St. Augustine to Dwight L. Moody have been men of dynamic confidence in the triumph of a great idea. Neil Dow, Elizabeth Fry, and their disciples, using on the causes of temperance with that motive force which they discovered in themselves, aroused the people wherever they went to assistance or to opposition. Fulton said, "I will build a steamboat." Cyrus Field said, "I will lay a telegraph cable to Europe." Sir Christopher Wren, imitating the builders of St. Peter's, said, "I will build the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral." General Washington said, "I will venture all on final victory." And General Grant said, "I will fight it out on this line." When Abraham Lincoln gave his eloquent tribute to Henry Clay in 1852, he said, "Henry Clay's example teaches us that one can scarcely be so poor but that, if he will, he can acquire sufficient education to get through the world respectably." To such men, log cabins were universities. Daniel Webster decided, at the end of his day's work plowing a stony field in the New Hampshire hills, that he would be a statesman. Thomas H. Benton, when nearly all men supposed the wilderness unconquerable, decided to push the Republic west to the Rocky Mountains. Solomon P. Chase, from the time he ran the ferry boat on the Cuyahoga River, kept in his pocketbook a motto, "Where there is a will, there is a way." Charles Sumner had a disagreeable habit of talking about himself and boasting of his learning. He was frankly told one day by James T. Fields that it was a weakening trait. Mr. Sumner thanked Mr. Fields and told him that he had determined to discontinue such foolish talk. "He fought himself," wrote Mr. Fields, "and he conquered." James G. Blaine, in college at Washington, Pennsylvania, saw a student who had been too devoted to football weeping over his failure to pass an examination. Warned by the failure of this student, James told his mother that he would not play another game of football while he was in college. He kept his resolution unbroken throughout the course. When James A. Garfield was earning his tuition as a bell ringer at Hiram College, he resolved that the first stroke of the bell should be exactly on the minute throughout the year. The president of the college stated that the people in the village set their clocks by that bell, and not once in the year was it 1 minute ahead or behind time. Grover Cleveland at 18 was drifting about from one job to another, and men prophesied that he would be a disgrace to his overpious father, who was a preacher. Mr. Cleveland said in a speech that, Like Martin Luther, I was stopped in my course by a stroke of lightning. It does not appear to what he referred, but it does appear that he decided firmly that he would choose some calling and stick to it. He decided upon the law and was so fixed in his determination to know law that he stayed in his tutor's office 3 years after he had been admitted to the bar, and there continued persistently in his studies.